Hello everyone, welcome to another video. My name is Marcel and today we'll be talking about this lens from Yongnuo for Sony full frame cameras. So welcome back to another video. It's great to see you back here again. I hope you had a great Christmas and that you were able to spend it with all your loved ones. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button for similar content to this one. So in today's video, I wanted to talk about this new lens that Yongnuo just came out with. A little disclaimer before I get started, this is not a sponsored video, but Yongnuo did send me this lens to test out. So I've had this lens for about 2 weeks and I've been taking some photos and some videos with it, and I have to say that I'm quite impressed with the quality of this lens. So this lens is a 50mm F1.8 lens for Sony full frame cameras, not to be confused with their apsc version of this 50mm lens, also F1.8. This is particularly made for full frame cameras like the A7 III, A7 IV, A7S III, and so on. This is what the box looks like. You get the lens cap, and you also get a little hood that I rarely use, so that's going to stay in the box. It's a prime lens, 50mm, and if you're starting out looking to get your first prime lens, the Nifty 50, which is what they call this focal length, is usually the best way to start with. In terms of price, this lens is considered to be a budget 50, a budget Nifty 50, so it's priced around $300, give or take, depending where you purchase it. That makes it a little bit more expensive than the Sony equivalent of the 50mm f1.8, which I believe is around $240, $220 in that range. So it is a little bit more expensive, but there are a few things about this lens that the Sony equivalent doesn't have. And one of them that I noticed right away is the auto and manual focus switch here and extra buttons in the body of this lens, which the Sony version doesn't have. So let's first talk about build quality of the lens. The lens is made with aviation aluminum and it has this sleek matte black look, which makes it very nice. It has a very big font, a 50mm here, written on the lens so that you know that it's a 50, but I feel like it's a little bit too big in my opinion, and aesthetically is not as nice to me. I prefer that if it was a little smaller, but that has nothing to do with the build quality or the quality of this lens itself, mostly aesthetic. The mount at the back, it's made of metal, and because this is an electronic lens, so this lens is able to communicate electronically with your Sony camera. It's also quite compact and it's not too heavy. It weighs at about 395 grams. And in terms of the body of this lens, what we have an auto focus to manual focus switch, which you can easily toggle directly in the body of the lens, which can be quite useful if you're shooting video and you're constantly changing between auto and manual focus. We'll talk about the autofocus capability of this lens later on in the video, so stay watching to find that out. They also include 2 function buttons, which you can program in your camera. You have to have a compatible camera. I believe it is compatible with the newer Sony cameras like the A7S III, A7 IV, but I found that I couldn't program these buttons with the A7 III. But if you have this lens, if you have been able to program these buttons with the A7 III or the A7 II, let me know in the comments below. This lens also has a rubber gasket, which makes it water resistant and dust proof. This lens has a very large aperture. It goes all the way down to 1.8, which makes it really good for super nice bokeh and also for low light shooting. This is a DSM motor, meaning that it has a digital control stepping motor, which makes it focus with high accuracy. And in the test that I'm going to show you, it actually performed pretty well. They also have a USB-C interface, and that is for you to update the firmware on this lens. You can easily plug your computer to the lens via the USB-C interface without having to connect this to a camera body and then plugging that camera to your computer if you were to update the firmware on this lens, and that's pretty useful. The only drawback is that this little rubber thing is really hard to take off, and once you take it off, it's really small and very easy to lose. Just a minor inconvenience, but something to keep in mind if you were to upgrade your firmware on this lens. All right, so let's talk about the sharpness of this lens. I think overall, with all the photos and videos that I was able to shoot in the 2 weeks that I've had this lens, it looks like a very sharp lens. So in these photographs, you can see that there is a little bit of vignetting when the lens is wide open at f1.8, and the areas in the corners are a little softer than the center when the lens is fully open at f1.8 as well. But as I start to close down the aperture, say f2.8, f4, and even f8, the overall image gets sharper around the corners as well. And this is something that is very common among third-party lenses or lenses around this budget range. So this lens actually delivered very sharp images and video when I was using it. In my opinion, it looks quite good. The bokeh that this lens produces is actually quite nice as well. Very round circle bokeh in the background. You can tell for yourself whether you like the bokeh that this lens produces or not. In terms of autofocus, I found that this lens performed okay in video mode with the Sony a7 III with face detection turned on, but on the a7 III, I had my autofocus sensitivity set to medium. I found that the lens was quite decent in keeping me in focus. The lens was able to keep me in focus most of the time. Occasionally, it will try to hunt for focus, and sometimes I found that it would take a little bit to find me or focus on me. But overall, for a lens at this budget price, I felt that the autofocus was quite solid. I didn't get a chance to shoot fast-moving subjects or sports with this lens yet, so I'll have to test the autofocus and high-speed burst a little bit more. In terms of fringing, this lens did produce some of it in some of the high contrast areas, but again, I had to zoom in quite a lot and pixel peep in these photographs to be able to see that purple line and that purple fringe. But as you can see here, zoomed out, when you look at the image as a whole, the fringing doesn't really stand out. So in my opinion, this photo is more than usable, and the fringing that you may see is unnoticeable unless you're pixel peeping again. So overall, I think this is a very great buy if you're looking for your first prime lens, or if you want a fast lens on a budget, or if you're looking for a portrait lens on a budget as well, or if you're moving from a kit lens and you want to get your first nifty 50, this is a good one to consider for the price. I'm actually quite surprised at this lens. Yongnuo doesn't produce too many lenses for Sony full frame cameras, but I think with this lens, they're sort of telling everybody that they're around and that they not only make lights or flash triggers, they can make high quality lenses for full frame Sony mirrorless cameras. I'm actually quite surprised, and I think I'll be using it quite often as my nifty 50. Let me know in the comments below if you have a nifty 50. If you do, let me know which one you have right now. And if you haven't subscribed, make sure you hit that subscribe button, like this video if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.